by my colleagues from Let's Grow Kids, Lorraine and Maria, who are managing our system today, making sure this works for us, and monitoring the Q&A and the chat box. And we're pleased to be partnering with Amaria Pendlebury of the Natural Child Care, a family child care program in Brattleboro, Nicole Walker from Apple Tree Learning Center in Stowe, and Lori Metcalf from Northshire Day School in Bennington. These three women, along with many others across the state, have been operating their programs for essential workers during the closure and have been generous enough to share their time with us and experiences with us today. So we do know that about 30% of programs in Vermont have been open during the pandemic, providing essential care. And these three women are among that 30% of the programs. And we know they have so many experiences and great lessons learned to share with us. And so, given that, I'm excited to hand this over to Lori to get us started.
Thanks so much, Luann. As Luann said, my name is Lori Metcalf. I work here at Northshire Day School in Manchester Center, Vermont. We currently are operating emergency childcare for essential persons. We have 16 staff on site and 12 early educators working remotely. And we have been operating since the beginning of the closure, and I'm happy to be here. And to start us off, I get to go first because we're going to talk about families and children first, because that's really the heart of the work. I know a lot of people have concerns, questions, wonderings, lots of unknowns, and so much of that just centers around how are we going to support our families and children in this time period as we move towards reopening and making plans to do so. So a few of the things I'm going to talk about today include communication, which is the key to everything, as we know, scheduling. I'm going to talk about what not to bring from home. We often tell families what they can bring from home, but we're going to talk about what not to bring. I'm going to talk about updating our policies and procedures for families, and then transition planning for families coming in. So as I mentioned, communication is key, right? We need to all work together. I think it's really important to remember in these complex times that we really are all in this together. We're navigating some new and sometimes bumpy waters, definitely a new early childhood landscape for all of us. Sometimes we can find comfort in that, though, that, you know, none of us is unique and that we're all navigating this for the first time. And the key in any of this, and especially with families and children, is to do this in partnership with them. That's going to be really important as you're moving forward. I heard this term transition anxiety. I think it was during some testimony I was listening to over the weekend. And I really thought that really captured what so many people are going through, but especially families and children, right? They're also entering into the unknown. For those who haven't been attending as children of essential persons, these children are going to have some anxiety and some unknowns. It's like starting again, right? We're beginning again in so many ways, and same for families. And we just want to recognize that and hold space for that, because that is an important part of in our communications with one another. It is really important. If I can't stress anything else, if you take nothing else away from this, I really just need to stress that keeping your positive and hopeful tones that we have in our work with children every single day can make a big difference. Children are going to pick up on, you know, your cues. We know they're very intelligent little beings, and we need to be regulated in order to be able to, you know, work effectively with them to support the families that are coming in. And so, you know, that positive and hopeful tone is going to make all the difference. It's okay to not know things, and it's okay to have fear, and it's okay, you know, to be a little scared sometimes, but we do need to remember to just move forward one little step at a time, and staying positive and hopeful will make a big difference for everyone. I think communicating with families should be frequent, especially in this time period. We've been very diligent about communicating with our families frequently here at Northshire Day School, both those who are here on site and those who are receiving remote learning in their homes. We've been honest. When we don't know something, we just say, listen, we don't know, but we're committed to figuring it out. And again, just staying hopeful. Like we're looking forward to when we can be back together. We're looking forward to what comes next. Even if we don't have all the details, we're looking forward to that. Really looking for opportunities to connect with your families and the children in your care in more personal ways than just email. Email is great, it gets the information out there, it's in writing, but those like little phone calls to individual families, having, you know, personal Zoom meetings or even class meetings via Zoom, maybe meeting up in your parking lot, those sorts of things. One of the things that we did a few weeks ago is we did have classroom family meetings via Zoom. And again, we didn't have any answers. We didn't even know at that point that we would have the possibility of reopening on June 1st. But we invited our families to these small group meetings to just share and like, what are your concerns? What are you thinking? What are the questions you have? Because even if we don't have the answers, we want to make sure we capture those and find out, you know, gauge where your families are at. We do daily updates and weekly communication. We also created a frequently asked questions document so that our families can access that document. And some of the questions say, you know, this is a board decision, or we don't know yet, or waiting for their guidance. And that's okay, because they know the questions are on there and they can check back to see when there will be updated answers. It's been really helpful, I know, to me in this time period to look at the frequently asked questions, you know, that we can get from the CDD website and other Vermont Department of Health, other places that are supporting us in this time period. And so it's also a great way to support your families.
And Lori, if I could add right here, for folks who are still looking for support around these tools to use for remote connections beyond email, that on the Let's Grow Kids website, there is previously recorded training about all the different tools like YouTube and Zoom, and that if folks need a refresher on how to use the tools, that's there still as well.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, Luann. So we're going to want to, everybody's wondering about scheduling, right? We're wondering about group sizes. We're wondering about how are we going to make this work? When are we going to schedule kids? And I don't know if you're all anything like me. I can get really caught up in that, like, oh my gosh, how are we going to make this work? But I think we just have to breathe and take things one step at a time. First things first, determine the needs of the families and children that you serve in your programs. But look at both their short-term and their long-term needs. If you were open on June 1st, would they want to return? If not, when were they thinking they would like their child to return? What are their needs, you know, into the future? So that you have the full picture before before you can figure out if you can meet the need, you got to know what the need is. And the need may have shifted. It can shift day to day, week to week for families, depending on, you know, what's going on in their lives, employment, all of those things. Consider what your options are. Once you know what the need is, what are your options? What space do you have? What group size are you looking at having to work with? What are your human resources? You know, nobody is going to expect you to do anything that you can't do. You have to look at what you do have and figure out what you can do, and that's okay. I think it's important to talk to families now about what kind of backup plan they might have for childcare. That's what we're doing here, and I'll tell you why. Because we don't know yet if we will be able to completely re-enroll all of our children right from the start. So we want to know how we're going to begin to look at prioritizing families and families that might have other childcare alternatives. We also want to plan ahead. Should we have cases where people are out or we're reduced staffing for any reason, what options families have in those cases, similar to when, families sort of have to plan sometimes in winter weather if you're a program who might close when the weather is bad, those sorts of decisions. Also, we want to make sure we know what people's backup plans in case for some reason there was a reason why our program had to close short term, okay? Also, it's important to be honest about limitations. I'm always really careful not to promise anything I don't know to be absolutely true. So it's just really good just to, if you don't know, you say you don't know. And if you're worried about limitations, I think it's important to just say like, yeah, I'm not really sure how these limitations are going to work for us yet. They're talking about maybe there might be larger group sizes, or maybe there'll only be group sizes of 10. Like, we don't know what the limitations are, but again, we're looking at all of that. And invite families to be a part of that problem solving process. I think that's really important, just to make sure that, you know, they're involved as well. Collective thinking is always better than individualized thinking. I know that in many parts of the state, and certainly in the South, like we have a very active early childhood network, our Starting Points Leadership Network, and we talk, well, we've been meeting weekly. We usually used to meet monthly, and now we meet weekly, and we're talking all about, like, how are you going to handle this? What are you doing about that? You can do the same things with your families. Help them become part of the solution. And then it really does become this partnership, because I know sometimes people can be worried, like, oh, families are going to be upset or angry if we can't do this or that. So invite them into the process. And then, you know, focus on how you're going to meet the needs. I really think that in this time period, it serves us really well. I know I've said it before, but remaining hopeful, focusing on the solutions, not the problems, and really trying to remember to be strengths-based as best as possible, because it really is what's going to carry you through, and it's what's really carried us through. I mean, when we started, you know, childcare for essential persons, we had never done that before. That was a whole new world to us, right? Now we have a sense of it. It's been 2.5 months. We've got a little bit better sense of how that all works, but it's all new, and you just walk through it.
Well, and it's just interesting, Lori, because we know of those 30% of regulated programs that have been operating, there's been very few issues around health concerns that you folks have been able to do it well and do it safely. So it's nice to hear the positive approach to this.
Thanks. Okay, so again, in thinking about what not to bring or how we're going to handle personal items from home, these are the things that we've put in place in providing essential childcare, and I would encourage others to put in place as you move into reopening. All personal items of the children that come into the program stay at the program. We don't have anything going back and forth. We're limiting that contact. We also are doing the laundry at the program. So bedding, extra children's clothes, those sorts of things we're doing here on site. Again, because we want to make sure things are laundered regularly, and we want to be able to make sure that whatever's here can continue to be reused. Make sure that, and this is something many of you are already doing, but just making sure that you have proper storage of items. Children's personal items are not touching, their nap mats are stored properly. All of those things will be really, really important in this time period. Ask families to provide duplicate comfort items. And I know this can be a hard one, which is why you want to start talking to families about this now. So if the child has a favorite blanket, that maybe they can get a similar blanket. And I know this can be hard, and it certainly can be, especially, you remember those, a day when a child showed up at your program and the parent might have forgotten the comfort item that morning, right? And it felt like a really big thing. And in the moment, it can be a really big thing. I'm not trying to minimize that, but over time, it might have to be a different comfort item, the comfort item that stays at school. You could even make it special, like, oh, this is your special, blanket or special stuffy for school, and then you have your stuffy for home. And then provide items, as needed, as best as you can. Next slide. When you're thinking about your policies and procedures for families, these are things that you can start working on now, prepare ahead of time. You want to be thinking about communicating your new drop-off and pickup procedures. In this time frame, of course, we've had to alter those based on the new health and safety guidelines. And we're going to talk about those a little bit later in the webinar, but that's one area that you'll want to look at revising. You'll also want to be looking at your health policies and making any revisions to health policies, like the lower fever threshold for exclusion. We'll also want to make sure that there's some sort of statement or really clearly communicated to families about their responsibility to communicate the health status of their child. We've always done the wellness checks upon arrival in the morning, and we just want to be in really good, clear communication with the families about anything that child may have been exposed to, any illness, any beginning symptoms. There is a list of questions that you'll be given that you can ask families upon arrival as well to help with some of that. Also talking to families about the change in any electronics policy. And I put this in here because if you are serving school-age children and you decide to open, around June 1st, many of your school agers will still be doing their remote learning work for the remainder of the school year. And so at times when we wouldn't usually have children on devices as much, we might have to make considerations for that in this time period and alter your policy short-term around electronics, but also having really clear expectations about this is what they're going to be used for. This is why we're changing the policy. It's really, I think, really helpful to everybody if people know what sort of the rules are, the guidelines are going into it. Just makes it easier for everybody to work within that structure.
Lori, there's a couple questions about how you handled baby bottles and cups, and also about asking, did you ask one family to drop off and pick up?
Sure, I can speak.
One family allowed to drop off, pick up at a time.
Sure. So baby bottles and cups stay here. We do not send them back and forth. I'll be completely honest, I'm not totally sure. I don't think we sent them back and forth before, so I don't think that's a new thing for us, but I can tell you absolutely right now that's not happening. So you do need to encourage your families to think about that ahead of time and make sure they have duplicates that can be left here. We're not even sending things home at the end of the week. We used to send home nap mat bedding at the end of the week, and we don't do that anymore. We launder it here and keep it here. And the second question was around one person picking up. We did ask our essential families to only have one person drop off, and preferably if it was a two-parent family and one was working in healthcare with direct contact with patients and one was not, we asked that the non-healthcare worker be the drop-off and pick-up person. We also are really sensitive to the fact that there are some families who don't have two parents and don't have other options. And there are other considerations you can make for those. And Amaria is going to talk about this as well during her part. The other thing that you may want to consider having some, wording or procedure around is hybrid programming. If not all of your children are going to return and you're going to continue to offer some sort of remote learning to those families who aren't on site, to have an idea of what that hybrid programming is going to look like. I know I've heard a lot of questions around this in our own staff community of like, what's this going to look like when we come back on site. So I think that's really, really important to give some consideration to that and to communicate that to families so they know ahead of time, especially if families have been receiving remote learning services and now it might not be possible for them. You want to make sure they would know that ahead of time as well. The other thing is to make sure you're updating your family handbook. So one of the first things we did before operating as an essential childcare was to make sure that we updated everything. So we took things out of our handbook in order to operate, like we weren't doing TS School checkpoints, we weren't doing family teacher conferences. So that anything that was in our handbook that we wouldn't be doing in this time period or any of our other documents, we took those out and we actually had a separate set of documents for emergency childcare for essential persons. You'll want to do some similar alterations to your policies and procedures for families, even though they're going to know like, oh yeah, we're not doing on-site family teacher conferences necessarily right now. You'll want to make sure that it's in writing and just clear for everyone. Next slide. Thank you. All right, transition planning, right? Moving into welcoming children back. Again, acknowledging transition anxiety, because talking about it and doing it are two really different things. And Nicole's going to talk about that in terms of your early educators and your staff, but also for families, right? Families might say to you, yes, I'm coming back. I'll see you on June 1st or whatever your reopen date is. And then they may get to that day before or even that morning and say, I'm not sure how I'm feeling about this, and really supporting people with that transition anxiety. Encourage your early educators to have a welcome back letter, sort of like a new beginning, kind of exciting, Welcome back. Can't wait to see you. One of the things that has been helpful to our team here is we have separate to-do lists, like our little master to-do list that we keep adding to before reopening. And so like this is leadership's list, and this is staff list, and this is, so this one would be for the staff list, but it's, to be able to help children and families really feel welcome to come back.
And I love your idea of it's not all the director or the owner's responsibility, that you can share the responsibility among the staff.
Yeah, that's really important because you can't do it all. If you're a director that's listening right now, like we've always known we can't do it all, even though some of us will try, like this is not the time to try to do it all. Like, again, going back to like our leadership network people, like we share forms, we share plans, we share, if you've got documents that you're altering, have a shared folder, and you can change out logos and use the same thing. Like literally we're walking this walk together, and we absolutely need everybody to do their part. It also, one of the things that can be helpful to people in times of anxiety is to have tasks to focus on. So in the weeks leading up to preparing for reopening, I think it's really helpful to really, sort of have these different tasks that people can support the program with and support children and families with. I'm going to talk about facial coverings for a minute. When we first started or made the decision to wear facial coverings here, at that time it wasn't a mandate. It was, just a voluntary thing, but we decided as a group that it really made sense for us. It's not because like we were naive about that it's not going to impact children. It's going to impact children. We weren't naive about it was going to be uncomfortable. We knew it was going to be uncomfortable. But we also knew we weren't health experts, and the Vermont Department of Health was recommending that this is one of the ways that we can protect our early educators and the children. And if it meant even one person didn't get sick, then it seemed like a worthwhile venture. We had a lot of reservations about it. I'm not going to lie. Like we were really worried about how the children were going to react to this. How might it feel to them? And so we did a lot around social stories and songs. We actually spent 4 days preparing our on-site children before we began wearing the facial coverings, just to really try to do the best we could because we knew it was going to be different for them. And so now, having that experience, I just have to say to you, like, I always knew children are amazing, but children are amazing. I mean, like really, they adapted and adjusted so much better than I could have even imagined. And granted, that's not going to be the case with every single child. I'm not saying it is. Every program's different. Every child is different. But I was really surprised. So, you might be surprised too if that's one of the areas that you're worried about. But we did do the social stories and songs with them. And now one of our on-site early educators is working with our remote educators about how they will incorporate the same social stories and songs into the Zoom meetings over the next couple of weeks as we move forward into a reopening. And that'll be really important so that the children are prepared even before they come back of what they can expect as well.
And Lori, I just wanted to add to let our guests know that there are a lot of social stories found on Facebook. I found a really nice one that are pretty simple, and a lot of the people making these social stories are very really encouraging everyone to use them. They want children to kind of have the answers, and a lot of them are, a lot of it is very simplified. Like it's not very complicated and really simple for the kids to use. So I actually printed off some social stories as well.
That's great. And we tried to make it like a superhero theme, like we're wearing masks, and then some of the older children, they wanted to wear masks and be cool like all of us. And so again, I can't stress enough, I really do think it was about how we approached it. We didn't approach it like, oh my gosh, this is going to be horrible. How is this going to work? We really said, okay, this is where we're at. This is what we're looking to be able to do. And how are we going to best do that to support the children and our educators in this time period? I completely understand about best practice. I absolutely do. And I'm not saying that we're not going to continue to do best practices, but what we do need to understand is what best practices are today, living through the COVID-19 pandemic, are different than pre-COVID-19. And that's okay. It's not forever. But our best practice right now is health and safety of everyone who's in our program. And so if that means a facial covering, then, you know, we have to adapt to that in this time period. And I'm not saying it's easy, not being naive about it, like, but this is the landscape that we're having to navigate. So how can we do that in a way that is helpful and moves us?
Another way we could get more help with facial coverings is ask those teachers who are currently teaching remotely to start wearing them while they're teaching remotely, so the children can start getting used to seeing them in those facial coverings now. And you can also maybe encourage your families to wear them a little bit around the house so the children can see, hey, mom is wearing that and she's able to still care for me and love me and she's still the same person. So if they see their families doing that at home, when they make their transition to school and they see us wearing them, they'll understand that this is still my teacher and she can still care for me despite wearing this facial covering on our faces.
Yeah.
Something else I told my families, I offer to print off social stories for them and laminate them here, and that way they can wipe them down and everything else, but that way they can actually share the social stories with their kids, you know, like just having the same stories going over and over, you know, it's just really helpful for the children to see that.
Both great points. Thank you both. You want to begin to help families and educators prepare children who will be coming in for new health practices. So, you know, really letting them know ahead of time of what it will look like when they come. Maybe even having a practice run, you know, when you're having transition or update visits, you may want to have one family come in at a time and do that little practice run as far as like, oh, we're going to take your temperature. We're going to, again, I remember the first morning we were, you know, getting ready to do this, and it was like, oh, I remember texting the person who was like, I know you're going to make it fun. Like, because it can be anxiety provoking if we approach it like that, right? But you can make it as fun as you can. You're all experts in making things fun and making things learning opportunities for children. So like, even though it might feel overwhelming in the moment, like literally you've got this. Like there's so much of what we need to do to be able to reopen childcare that like you're really good at. Again, having transition visits with families, doing, you know, you could do those either on site, you could do those over the phone. You want to be talking with them, you know, about their child's development, where their child is at, any concerns, questions. And when we were preparing the presentation, and I can't remember who said it now, but somebody had the idea of doing classroom videos where, you know, you can make a video, have your early educators make videos of the classrooms and just like, oh, remember, this is the area in the class where we have snacks. This is the area where we play with blocks. This is the area where we nap. You know, just reacquainting them ahead of time with this space, with the procedures. You know, for us, our families are not allowed to enter beyond the first door entryway. And this will be a change for children. So they won't be having their family member bring them to their classroom. So anything you can do in advance to prepare them for these changes will only be helpful when they actually return on site. Again, making sure there's that word communication and making sure clear communication, sharing policies, answering questions. Other, you know, unique things that people have done are teacher parades where the teachers are, you know, standing socially distant apart outside and families come by in their cars, and or doing videos for children. The good thing about videos, we're doing a lot on Zoom and remote learning, and that's fantastic. The great things about videos is they can be played over and over again. And we know part of learning is those repetitive actions and reminders. And also I've heard it's a great tool for families who are like trying to get that last minute work done. If they can put a video on of their teacher reading a book, that might get them 5 minutes. So those are just all ideas of things that can be really helpful to families, both now and moving into reopening. It's important to make sure you're updating developmental learning plans and goals. I know this is probably the furthest thing from people's minds right now, so it might not be at the top of the priority list, but you do, you know, you don't want to lose sight of the early education component of what you provide as part of childcare and early ed. So you want to make sure that, you know, you're talking to parents, you know, a child might have you know, a couple months ago been crawling, and now all of a sudden they're up and walking, right? Or they're moving from, you know, mastering one skill to moving on to that next skill. And you want to have some idea of where all the children are at so that you can plan appropriately for them in the weeks to come. And now's a great time to do some of that advanced planning, right? And take the pressure off when you're all back on site, is you can get some of those lesson plans done now. So it's good to know where your children are at. Review all the changes in learning space, routines, schedules, rules with families. And then providing visual supports for children and families will also be really helpful, because even though we know to socially distance, how many people think it's like really helpful when you see those markings on the floor? It's not only a reminder, but like actually tells you what 6 feet is. You know, think about how you're going to do drop off and pick up, and, you know, sort of mark off the areas, or have stop signs on areas that, you know, the outside people aren't entering into. Those are the sorts of things that'll be really helpful. And again, this is another area where we do this really, really well, because there are tons of visual supports in your classrooms already for children around, you know, the hand washing and the feelings and just all of those things. Are just being mindful about, like, oh, is there any other visual supports I can put into place for the children before they return.
And
And
Lori,
then-
the shared services website right now has the hand washing and the no visitor posters there. We are also in the process of trying to develop a bunch more of the posters that will be requested, and get them on the shared services site in the near future. So I
That's
just wanted to put that
fantastic.
plug in.
And Lori,
Yeah,
before
no.
you go on, I just want to tell people with questions that some of the questions we're not ignoring, we just don't know the answer to, like vinyl shower curtain to block a doorway. We wouldn't have that answer. That might be a CDC question, maybe for Brina Homes, or if you have primarily an outdoor program, specifics to that and how that works. I don't think we're experts on that, or any like CC financial assistance programs you'd have to direct towards CDD.
Yeah, we're sort of the nuts and bolts of like working in the programs. But those are all great questions, really great questions. Also, I noticed recently, not that it was on there recently, but I noticed it recently, Let's Grow Kids website also, as part of some of their resources in the webinars, they have other resources, like they had this great feelings, you know, different faces and stuff for the children. Because here's the thing that we're thinking about. So if you can't see my face, how can I also communicate with you how I'm feeling? So not just how children are feeling, but how are adults feeling as well, so that children can be aware of like how you're feeling, and that like, even though you can't see me, like I'll say to some of the school agers when I say good morning, I'll say, I'm smiling at you, even though you can't see me smiling, you know, just to remind them that like, this is, you know, like this is okay, everything is good. So those sorts of supports can be really, really helpful, those visual supports. And then thinking about whether you're going to offer programming or not for those who are not able to return yet. If you're not able to operate at full capacity, or there are other reasons why families are not ready for their children to return on site, then, you know, what kind of programming might you offer them in the interim, and what might be possible. So that's what I'm going to conclude there, and I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Nicole Walker. So take it away, Nicole.
Thank you, Lori. So I'm going to be touching base in regards to the phases of staffing throughout this whole process. So we have been open for essential care, and currently we're serving 20 children. That's increasing a little bit each week, as more and more parents are starting to feel more comfortable with sending their children here. We currently have 6 staff members that are working full-time here on site, plus myself and the owner of Apple Tree. And each week we're bringing in more and more staff as enrollment is picking up. I think something to keep in mind, that staff are a huge part of this process. And without the staff, we actually don't have a program to reopen to. So we need to keep in mind their feelings, their desires, their thoughts, and asking them about their journey and where their head is at through each of these phases as we work through to getting to the reopening stage. So keep in mind, any director, any childcare facility could be in any one of these stages currently, depending on the path that they chose to take through this process. The first stage is the initial stage. Those first several days upon closure, that was a really scary time. It was scary for directors, it was scary for parents, it was really scary for the staff, the unknown. The next stage is the early stages, you know, the weeks into the closure, the process to maintain those connections with staff throughout this time. And then the knee-deep stage, which for me is the longest lasting stage thus far, but that's where you're keeping those connections, you're preparing staff to start thinking about their return to work and what that would look like for them. And then the reopening stage, which is, I feel, the stage that we're currently in, and we're working on setting our plans to reopen, connecting with our staff on how that's going to look, hearing them out, what are their thoughts in regards to that, and really working on rebuilding our classroom teams and our school-wide community. Because while we've kept our community strong, so to speak, during this time, it's been a different sense of community. So we really need to work on rebuilding the community we had prior to, knowing that it will look a little bit different than it does right now. Next slide. So the initial stage is, like I said, the very beginning stage. It's, you know, any director or childcare program could currently be living in this stage at this time. It's where maybe you've chosen to close and you've laid off your staff. Maybe you got the state funding, that stabilization grant. Maybe you've had to lay off and now you're rehiring staff. Being sensitive to the process that takes. Laying off staff is an incredibly difficult thing to do. None of us ever want to be doing that. And the mass amount some people had to do was really detrimental to themselves and each staff member in general. So being supportive of your staff through that, helping guide them through unemployment. A lot of these people have never had to do this before. And while we're not experts in that either, the least we can do is be supportive and encourage them and try to help to the best of our ability. And then the rehiring staff, some of us chose to lay off initially, and then, which is what we did, and then we decided to do the stabilization grant a couple weeks after. So we got to make the lovely phone call of bringing everybody back on board, which was much better than the face-to-face laying off part. And that made everybody feel really good. It made them feel really positive about where we're at. But then come a lot of questions. What are our expectations? What are you going to want us to be doing? I've never taught remotely. That's not in my job description. I don't know how to do that. Well, guess what? We're all going to learn together because I don't know how either. And listening to them, hearing them, supporting them. What are your ideas? What platforms do you like to use? What do you think is easiest for you? Do you have internet? Those sorts of things. And checking in regularly with them, not even just about work, to be honest. I care about my staff. They're my community. They're my extended family. A lot of them have been here since the day Apple Tree opened 21 years ago. So I really have a very strong connection with these people, and I care about how they're physically doing and mentally doing. So checking in with them via phone calls, emails. We use constant contact messages, and a few of my staff were very concerned that my weekly love notes would not continue. I think it's usually a bunch of, you know, random updates and information, but to them it's a love note. So I've continued my weekly love notes. Sometimes they get two. I even title them love notes because that's what they like, which is kind of fun for them. Sometimes they're not so loving. It's filling them with information that we're getting, but for them it feels like they're still connected. So maintaining those connections is huge for them. And then during this stage, you're also setting the stage for what's coming up. Even though we don't know how long this is going to last. You know, some of us we didn't have a date initially. Now, even that we do have a date, maybe we're not too sure about that date, and that date feels scary for us. So therefore, we might still be in this stage. What are your expectations? What are your plans? What are you looking to do? You know, and ask for their feedback and suggestions. And honesty is huge. I think the past 8 weeks, I've shared more with people or with my staff than I ever have before. There's not a whole lot of secrets at this point, but I think that helps them have faith and see that we really are putting ourselves out there for them. Like, we care so much about our business, about our families, our staff, our children, and we really want this to work. And here's what we're doing. No, we may not have the money to buy that 8-seat stroller that you really want, or no, maybe we can't upgrade the playgrounds right this second, but we can keep this business running. And just remaining positive. I mean, something that I've done this whole time is, even though inside, you know, it's been scary and it's been frustrating and it's been hard, we've all been asked to do things that we just don't want to do, but we're doing them. And I think it's really important as a leader that we remain calm and confident, and we reassure our staff of everything that's happening. Like, we have faith, we will get through this. If we stay calm and work together, we can accomplish basically anything that we want to. So just staying together as a team, remaining calm and confident in our decisions, and reassuring them to the best of our abilities. And like Lori said, we don't always know the answers, and that's okay. A lot of the times I have no idea, but it's nice to hear their voices, and it's nice to hear those questions, because then I know what they're thinking. So if we don't ask, or if we don't take the time to call and reach out, then we won't know what they're thinking. And we got to remember, they're not here every day. We are. We know what we're doing. We know the regs as they come out, which are, you know, constantly changing, and guidance is changing. They don't know these things. So, because they're not face to face with it each day. So just sharing it with them throughout this process and reassuring them that we will and can do this. Next slide. The early stage, this is, you know, when you're diving in and you're really setting the stage for the weeks to come. Many programs might still be in this stage, not sure if they're going to be opening on June 1st. Does that work for them, for their community, their staff, their parents? There's a lot that goes into that date. But something that I think is really important is remaining positive and reading all of the information, asking questions. You know, one of my biggest resources, honestly, has been a local child care center. And, you know, some could see that as a competitive type situation, but for me, we're all in this together. Our goals are the same. We have the same passions, and the end outcome we want to be the same. So therefore, we've been reaching out and staying connected. What are you doing with your staff? How are you helping your staff? What does that look like for you? And, you know, have you heard any new policy changes? Have you, you know, what do you think about this? And brainstorming together and coming up with a policy that maybe both programs can use in regards to staffing or families or anything really. And during this, you know, keeping staff up to date and informed on all of these stages. All information as it comes in. Some of it's a little overwhelming, and I think there's a fine line of balancing that. What do we share with staff? Have we already sent them a lot today or this week? Maybe that should wait till next week. Just picking and choosing what we choose to send and when. And if people haven't heard from us or my staff in a couple of days, it's not because I am not interested or I've lost that connection. It's because I'm trying to balance all of the information that I'm getting and picking and choosing how and when I share it, just so they're not getting overwhelmed, because it really can be overwhelming.
I think that's a great point, Nicole, and also important to remember when you're communicating with children and families as well, like there can be information overload. So there is that balance. I'm really glad you pointed that out.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as a director, I mean, anyone who's not overwhelmed with this constant changing information is, wow, God bless you. It's incredibly overwhelming, and it's a lot, and our days don't end at 5:30 when we close. So it's long and it's challenging, and you know, I think we need to all really rely on each other, like Lori said. Ask people for help. I mean, directors, we can't do this by ourselves. This is a big ask, and there's a lot to do. And even if it seems little and small, it's huge in our eyes. Just, you know, from labeling things on the floor and posting signs and all of those things. So finding ways staff can help and not necessarily physically be with children if they're not really comfortable.
And people are really, like, they really want to help. Like, we want to help one another. Like, it's this time period of, like, really coming together as communities within programs and bigger communities, that people really do want to help one another, right? I mean, we know some of the great antidotes to anxiety in adults is getting outside of ourselves and being of service to other people. And so it's a great way to, like, yes, then your people are helping you, but it also could be helping them as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, and I think about the sort of the economies of expertise, everybody coming together and sharing their ideas only results in better policies or better resources that you're developing because, you're working together. So it's a great example to follow. Thanks.
And if staff feel engaged and involved, then they're more likely to help with the follow through. You're gonna tie them in easier than if they're not connected or involved at all. At least that's what I've learned in general. Keeping those personal connections is huge. I mean, there's a real fear factor for these staff that have not been here. The 6 of us that have been here this whole time, I'm not fearful to come to work because I've been coming here every single day throughout this entire process. I haven't missed a beat. But they've been home, they've been in their own little bubble and experiencing their own road and journey through this process. And I think that their journey and their path deserves to be heard and it's valued. And we need to try to understand. While we might not be able to relate or completely understand, we can at least listen. And we can start gauging, okay, what are you afraid of? And maybe we can't offer promises, like Lori said, you can't offer promises to families. I can't promise anything to staff, but I can listen and I can make notes as to what each of their fears are, and I can hold on to those. And then when I am looking at rewriting my plans to reopen, I can go back on that. Okay, what was so-and-so fearful of? How can I address that? That way, when they're reading these plans that we have to create in order to reopen, they can say, oh, Nicole took that idea, excellent. Like they're gonna feel involved and feel like we really listened throughout this whole stage. Even if it's a fear you introduced back in the early stage, and that was 6 weeks ago, you might still see it in the plan that's now 8 weeks later. I think that helps people feel heard. And that's really, really important. And understanding that some of these people haven't left their house. They haven't gone to the grocery store. They're getting deliveries to their homes. They literally haven't left. So now, when you're talking about returning to work or what this might look like, or they're not too interested. And that's a hard sell during this stage. So just keeping in contact, sharing information, and helping them feel involved through this at least helps make them feel a part of the community. Setting requirements and keeping staff engaged. Like what are your requirements of staff in the beginning phases? What are you asking them to do for families? What are you asking them to do for children? How are you really keeping them a part of the community? And then professional development. What are our requirements for professional development? Anyone doing the stimulus or stabilization program through the state, we are required to ask them to do some professional development. So Let's Go Kids is great about sending information out, shared services, NACCE, Teaching Strategies Gold. There's a lot of online platforms right now and resources for these teachers. So share it with them. Keeping in mind balancing, you don't want to send somebody 25 trainings a week because they might think they really have to do that. And that's going to be very overwhelming. So really looking at the training topics and thinking about each staff member and and maybe you send some as a whole group, but maybe you tag somebody separate and say, hey, this might be a really nice training for you. That helps them feel like, oh, wow, they really know where I'm at and they really understand some things that I would benefit from.
Yeah, and one thing I was just thinking of that I hadn't thought of when we talked previously, Nicole, was that idea also of having them incorporate self-care into the work that they're doing right now, whether it's completing a self-care wheel or doing a self-care plan, because that's really important now and certainly will continue to be important as we move forward. And so I was thinking about like all the trainings I sent, and then I remember I had this aha moment during one of our Leadership Network meetings where they were like, well, yeah, I'm having them focus on, and I was like, oh, right, self-care. Really great reminder. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Your weekly forms of communication and what are our expectations with that? Are we asking them to write weekly newsletters? Are you asking them to connect via Zoom and FaceTime or whatever platform your staff have chosen to use or you guys feel comfortable with, but setting expectations that are clear so it's not wishy-washy, like what am I really supposed to do? Because they don't know. They're at home. They're not with us every single day like we normally are, where you can run into their room and say, hey, can you blah, blah, blah for me, or this family needs that, or this family needs that. You have to keep connecting with them. And, like I said before, as a director, I can't do all of this on my own. Our daily task is really quite something right now, and it's overwhelming. So whatever you can do to delegate is great. And we happen to have an assistant director, so I reached out to her and I asked her to be fully responsible for keeping in track of the remote learning opportunities and requirements for our staff. So I spoke to her, I asked her or told her what I would like her to reach out for everybody and do, and she's kept track of it this whole time and sends me weekly updates. So I read them, I know them. Sometimes I get the Zoom invites and I pop in and out just so I can see everybody and gain a sense of what everybody's doing, which is really fun. But I had to separate that task because I knew that it just wasn't something I was able to do. But I did still, even though she was doing that, I still make sure every single week I try to connect with every employee. Not about work necessarily. If they choose to talk about it, that's wonderful. But if they want to just talk about personally and where they're at, then I'm okay with that as well. And then once again, I'm putting it in there, remaining calm and confident and reassuring. This is really hard. This is really hard for these teachers. They have, they're homeschooling their children at home. Their husband maybe lost a job. Maybe they're fighting with unemployment. Maybe their kids are just really challenging and going through social emotional issues within themselves. They're having a hard time with homework, technology, any of those things. And I think just understanding and having someone that they can call and reach out to that will just listen and remain calm and reassure them that we have their best interest in mind and that we're confident we will pull through this is really, really critical for these staff. Next slide. The knee-deep stage. This has been a really tricky stage. This has been the longest lasting stage, I feel like. And there's just a lot of big feelings that come in with this. We're starting to talk about potentially reopening and what that might look like, and how do you feel about that, and continuing to check in regularly, regardless of how busy we get. We always have to keep in mind, if we don't have staff, we will not be able to reopen, and that's true enough. So checking in with them regularly and seeing where they're at. And sometimes it can be about work. Sometimes it can be just a personal check-in. And individually, I think it's really important to continue to check in with them individually. And, how are you physically, mentally, emotionally? Are you going for walks? Are you taking care of yourself? Maybe someone has a medical condition, so you're checking in and seeing how they're doing. Are they taking care of that? Not because you're being nosy, but because you actually care, and to know that they have someone they can connect to, and wow, my boss really cares about how I'm doing. This keeps them engaged and lets them see that this really is a community and we really do care about one another. And, continue to listen to their story, because as we're going through this, they're going through it too. And their journey is very different than ours. It's not right or wrong, it's just different. And I think instead of focusing on what we can't do, let's focus on what we can do, because we've proven over these past 2.5 months that we can do way more than we ever thought or felt we could. I had no idea that I could do this. And guess what? I can, and I am. And that's something to be really proud of. And guess what? Your teachers are doing it too. They're teaching remotely, they're staying healthy, they're staying positive, they're doing what they need to do, and we're doing what we need to do. So yeah, there are a lot of negative comments and things on the news or whatever it might be, but let's just stay positive and know that our goal is the same. We might have taken a different path to get to this goal, but our goal of reopening and all coming together at some point is the same. So how can we do that, even though we're taking different journeys?
I think those are excellent points, Nicole. And I think also for those who are working on site now, like remembering in this time period what it was like when you first did that. The first morning you got in your car and you drove to work, or if you walked to work or biked to work, that feeling of the unknown, that feeling of that anxiety. And so then we, you sort of walk through that, right? And you get to the other side of that at some point. But the people who haven't yet walked through that, and none of us have walked through reopening, so we're all walking through it all together and letting people know, like, if you have some staff on site and some staff off site, that we're still all in this together, because it's still another new experience that we're going to come together to walk through.
That's very true. And it's easy for, for those that aren't here, they're making comments or suggestions or tips and guidance. And I think it comes all with good intentions, and they don't know what we've been doing here. They haven't experienced it or felt it. And those of us that are here are experiencing something very different. So it's just keeping in mind that all of our experiences are different, but we all have feelings towards it. I make a point to check in with my staff that are working here every day. How do you feel today? Do you feel safe when you're here? And I listen to those, and I don't ask those questions to get a pat on my back. I ask those questions because I want to make sure that they do feel safe here. That's my job as a director, as a leader, as a director, whatever you want to call me. That's my job, is to make sure everyone feels safe. And if they feel safe and they've been here this whole time, let's share why you feel safe at a staff meeting, so you can share it with other people, what we're doing here to help support each other. And maybe that'll help people start feeling more comfortable.
Well, and I hear you both talk a lot about, and I know Amaria will get to it too, about focus on what you have power over.
Yep.
The overwhelming issue can seem overwhelming, but there are so many specific things that you can control, that you can affect, and that your staff and parents can do with you. And that's a powerful way to help people feel connected, comfortable, and move forward.
Mm-hmm. And the whole community. I mean, our community now is a bit different than it ever used to be, holding monthly staff meetings where we have pizza and we laugh and we're all close in little chairs in a classroom. Those days are not here right now, but it doesn't mean that we still can't keep our community going and even be stronger after this. I mean, think of everything we've learned and been through this. Even if we're here, if we're at home, we've all learned something. So let's bring that together and be creative and decide how we can continue doing this moving forward. I think it's important to hear everybody's ideas, and sometimes we won't be able to make that change for whatever known reason, but we can always listen and say, that's a great idea, let me look into that. Ask questions. I mean, I want them to ask me questions, and if I don't know an answer, I'm going to try to figure it out, and I may not be able to find it right now, but I've made a note that that's an important question for my staff, and somehow, some way, we'll figure that out. Listening to what it is they want to do. We've been doing Zoom staff meetings. The first one was purely just a social event, just to see everybody's face and smile, and it was really nice just to keep that connection and see everybody. And now we're starting to use them as real staff meetings, and we share ideas and thoughts and some new policies, just getting them prepared for the next phase, just keeping that connection going with them. Continued engagement with families and children and what our expectations are in regards to that, because as this keeps changing and evolving, and we think about, wow, this might be a little bit longer, what are we really expecting our staff to do, and start to think about what can we do to start getting them to come into the building. I've learned that this is the most challenging process for me, is getting people to actually feel comfortable coming back into this building. So starting to have them think about that, and what does that look like, and being very clear with our expectations, begin to discuss scheduling needs moving forward. What's that going to look like? Are we open to changing our hours of operation? Are we open to changing to do 10-hour days? Are we looking to shorten our days? Or what are we looking to do? But hearing everybody and coming up with a decision that makes the most sense for your own business. But we really need to start to get staff into the building that aren't typically coming here on a daily basis, and finding little ways that they can help. And like I said before, it might seem really small, like we have a refrigerator in every single classroom. Can you come in and clean all the refrigerators except the rooms that we're using? You won't be in contact with any other person. We will leave you alone. You can come in with your mask and your gloves or whatever you feel comfortable with, just text me when you're here and text me when you leave. So for safety reasons, I know who's in my building. But other than that, we will leave you alone. And just start having little expectations like that of them so they get used to leaving their home. But you know, they can feel comfortable that I'm valuing their desire to still keep distance from other people.
Nicole, while you're talking on this slide, I did notice that there was a question on there about like, how do you support the people that might not be able to because they have a health issue? So I just thought, like, now that you're talking about this, like the really being open and honest and talking about the different ideas, like how to branch out and like support the people that might not be able to come into the building or that sort of thing.
I think that goes back, that's a great question. That goes back to, in the beginning, knowing your staff and knowing what they're capable of or how they're feeling, or being open and honest during that phase. When you start thinking about having them return and ways to return, we know our staff right now, and we know who's able and who's not able because we were so open in the beginning. So just having different expectations for those few staff so they can still feel connected and heard and part of the community, but they don't actually have to start coming into the building, or having them do it on a weekend when we're closed. So there's really not anybody here. So maybe they can come in and paint a fence or something, you know, that needs to be done that we can't necessarily afford to pay somebody to do right now, but it still needs to be done. So we're reaching out with them and figuring out what they're able and capable of doing, and we'll be flexible with that.
Yeah, there were two other questions that I thought were good, not good, but we could answer. One was, do you ever, like if kids come in and they might have a runny nose, but you're not sure, is it allergies, is it teeth? Do you have like questions like, do you just say no because you have a, you know, how does that work for any of you? How do you decide when to say no, thank you?
Well, I think it comes back to knowing your children and knowing who has allergies and reading their paperwork and really understanding the children in your care. If it's new and we haven't seen it before from this child, then we're going to send them home because we don't allow any child or staff member to be here sick. So if it's an unknown, then they're going to go home and they need to stay home until they're, you know, free of those symptoms. If it's a child that we know and we have documentation and it's a history that, you know, we're aware of, then it's a little bit different. But for the most part, there's no child or staff member here that's sick.
Right.
Yeah, we ran into that as well. Like operating as emergency childcare, we did have a lot of new families enroll, and we had a child who came to visit, and she was coughing a lot, and it had to do with an uncontrolled asthma condition. But because it wasn't controlled, we did have to let her know, like, we can't serve you right now until that's under control, because one, we do have to be aware of, and I'm not a health expert, I'm just telling you how we handle it here in our program. Although we did call the Department of Health and said, like, this is our situation and we don't want to not, you know, be welcoming, but we also, because of, you know, people can be asymptomatic and still carry it. And if a young child is coughing a lot all over, like, we can't control that. Like, again, you know, we're living through the COVID-19 pandemic. So the decisions we used to make, we can't always make in this time period. So it's going to be hard for families. It's going to be hard for them when their child has a fever because of teething and they get excluded for 72 hours.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be hard. But that is what we're all having to walk through and live through. And you know, again, getting families involved in the problem solving process. Like, is there a way, you know, for them to talk with one another about resources for backup childcare, in-home childcare for those days when their child's sick, those sorts of things. But I do think, you know, just to echo what Nicole said, if you're here, you're healthy, you're well, you're fully participating, you don't have any symptoms on the COVID-19 symptom list, and if you do, then we follow the guidelines, because that's how we know we can keep people healthy and safe.
Nice.
Yeah.
One
I
other.
do know that Amaria has, as she gets into her part with all the nitty gritty, as we're calling it, some of these questions might be addressed in detail.
Well, just
So-
one more that is not, I don't think, just, it says, is there a number a parent can call if they have questions about the changes?
Parents right now call me. So every parent that has a question calls or emails myself and or the owner of Apple Tree, and
Well, they asked for a state number, but they call the CDC.
they could call CDC or the Vermont Department of Health,
That's what I meant, sorry.
Or 211.
or 211.
I actually had I had a parent actually call CDC, Vermont Department of Health, to ask them a question about, if they might have been exposed or anything else like that, what the procedure was. And so the CDC was very helpful and helped the parent feel very reassured. So they're very willing to listen and support the families.
Great, thanks.
So something that I forgot to mention before, it has part of the whole community is, staff, some of them are incredibly energetic and they really, really care about the community and keeping everybody engaged. And, I think we all do in a sense, but you could tell some are really eager to share these. And I think that's lovely. So even though sometimes we may not have time to put some of these things together, I think it's really important to put that effort in there. We had a staff member who wanted to do a slideshow for our families, and we're in the process of putting that together now, and that's a lovely idea. And they wanted to do a school parade and have everybody out here social distancing 6 feet apart and have our families drive by and honk, and we danced and celebrated even from a distance. And the Stowe reporter was here taking photos, and it was just a lovely way to still build on our community even though we couldn't be close and do what we normally would do. And lastly on this slide, just once again, keeping all your staff informed with the day-to-day changes. Even though it's a lot, I think it's really important that when we have a change that really affects them, or they might really be able to give some thoughts and suggestions on if it pertains to their classroom or a routine drop-off, pickup, anything like that. I think it's important to really include them and ask for their suggestions. And like I said, we may not be able to do everything that they suggest, but we can at least hear and brainstorm and have them be part of this reopening phase with us instead of against us. Next slide. And now we're at the reopening stage, which I think you're all starting to get into, and keeping up to date with all of the new requirements and staff policies and things that we need to be aware of, continuously updating them with new information, requirements, expectations, guidelines. We're writing the reopening plan, and we've been reaching out to them for the past couple of weeks in regards to what they feel could be in there, what that might look like for drop off and pick up in their room, discuss those things at a staff meeting just so they can feel a part of that plan, and continue to do the whole group discussions. How can we best support each other? Continue hosting your weekly staff meetings, discuss these policies, talk about changes when they come in. We're going to be doing the health checks and our cleaning and sanitation schedule, what our scheduling needs are going to be, and just continuing to build on our school-wide community as best as we can. And then it's also still really important to still connect with them individually. Like, where is your fear factor at? Where are you with this? What are your needs individually? And I don't necessarily want that to be part of our live Zoom chats, because some things are very private and don't need to be shared amongst the entire staff. So keeping confidentiality in mind and making sure we try to meet the needs as individuals to the best of our ability. And then setting up small group discussions and with each individual classroom. So what are your classroom needs? Okay, now we've met as a group and now we've met individually, but now let's get back together on our grouping, classroom teacher groupings, and what are your needs and what do you think your children and families would need, and what do you two need as a working team together, and what can we do to help support that? And then continue to have small step and weekly requirements to slowly start getting them to enter the building. And at this point, it's sort of not really an option. Like, we have to really start getting them in here. We have to get this building ready for these children to be open. And it can be simple things. It could be come in and fill all the paint bottles, come in and take all the staples off the wall, scrub all the stuff that's been bothering you on the windows, get it all off. Really get these rooms ready. Get all your supplies ready, rotate your toys, clean all the chairs, like really thoroughly clean your space and your program. So when June 1 happens, we're ready for every classroom. I think it's also prepping them for change. If the numbers stay till 10, obviously people understand that that means change for them. If we can't have more than 10, many of us have. So sharing what our plans are, what have we done to look at that? What are we planning to do? What other spaces? Be creative. I mean, we're fortunate enough to have a pretty large space with some extra classrooms that we can utilize, knowing that not every center is like that, but just share your plans and ideas with your staff. There's no reason not to. It helps them feel more secure and really understand that you're looking at the whole picture. So I think that's really important. And once again, through all of this, I can't stress it enough that just remain positive and supportive and calm and confident. Even if you're, scared, I think it's okay to share with them. I don't really know about that yet, or I've been worried about that myself, but here's what I'm doing. Instead of just focusing on that worry, let's talk about what we can do and what we can do to brainstorm to get through this. If we've made it this far, we can certainly continue on this path. I have no doubt. But it's not about me as a director. It's not about Sonia, who's the owner of Apple Tree. This is us. And we're a true community. And what can we do together to make June 1st the best possible day?
Well, and Nicole, as I listen to you, I hear a real balance of responsiveness and listening, and also eye on the goal.
Right.
As the leader, what you're talking about is listening to them, hearing and being responsive to each individual need. And yet, you're a childcare business that needs to open. And so it's all about this. I'm picturing it as sort of like a funnel, like you're moving them forward all toward this goal in a, very sort of, they might not all even know they're being pushed right along.
And obviously in the end, everyone needs to make decisions that they need to make, and that's okay. You might decide that this isn't for you. You're not able to commit to this anymore. It's beyond what you feel you're capable of. There's no ill feelings.
Yeah.
There's not time for that. While we can be sad and maybe not understand ourselves, we need to be supportive and understanding and move forward. So I think just understanding that this is hard for everybody involved, and just being as supportive and confident as we can will help, ensure them that this is a safe place to be, and we will do the best that we can, but we have to work together.
I think that's an excellent point, Nicole, that it's so true that this is when people, went into early education, this is not, what they signed up for. It's not what any of us signed up for. I'm pretty sure nobody, no matter what field they're working in, is saying, hold on, I didn't sign up for this. I don't really want to do it, but I do think it's important to allow people the space and the time to make those decisions for themselves, because we've always known this about early childhood educators, they're all in, right? They're not in it for the money. They're not in it for the hours. They're not in it for the benefits. They're just all in because of the work. And the work has changed slightly, right? The landscape has changed. And so just being able to sort of assess yourself, where am I at? And am I still all in?
So that's the end of my section. I'm now going to pass it on to Amara.
Hi. So my name is Amaria Pendleberry. I am the owner, director, teacher, absolutely everything.
Bottle washer.
I have family home child care in Brattleboro, Vermont. So I have been noticing a lot of questions from other family home child care providers. So I'm hoping that I answer you guys and just offer some support, and knowing that it's tough. It's tough being the one person to kind of do absolutely everything. I have a lot of self-staff meetings. It's very very quiet. But my husband always asks me why I'm so quiet, and it's just there's a lot of processing definitely that's going into this. So my section is called the nitty gritty. It's the drop off and pick up, health policies, supplies needed, changes to the environment that might be happening. So hopefully as we go through this answers a lot of the question and answers that have been brought up. So next slide, please. So drop off and pick up. So a lot of my information is coming just right from CDC and CDD, their website, just really looking through it for everybody, just kind of consolidating everything. So there were some questions about drop off and pick up. Now, obviously with me being a family home childcare, I don't have as many families, but from all the research and the communication that I've done with other people, it's staggering drop-off times, really that communication that Lori and Nicole have been bringing up, like really communicate well. What time are people going to be dropping off? Being ready for them, limit the direct contact. If you have a center, you might put tape on the floor saying if a family is already, getting their temperature taken, please give space. This is where you would wait. Just really being very thoughtful about it. There are going to be parents wanting to drop off. It might take a little bit. Some days it might take a little bit longer than you planned. So just really having a backup plan and knowing where the families can stand, and then communicating that with the families so that they know. If any of you've been to a store, I felt really, really reassured knowing that they had a little box for me to stand in. I knew exactly where 6 feet away from the other person was. It felt very good, and it seems so silly, but honestly, like having that planned out just really is going to reassure your families and your staff and the children. So ideally you'd have the same person drop off and pick up. Lori mentioned that they did ask if they worked in the health department to please have another person from the household drop off and do pickup just to reduce the risk. But even if not, then you would want the same person dropping off and picking up, just reduce the amount of germs. The hand hygiene stations near entrance. And again, this is going to look very different depending on what your space is. There's one program that as soon as you walk into the door, there was hand sanitizer readily available. And then they did the health check. And then the staff brought the child to the classroom. And then in the classroom, the child washed their hands again with soap and water for 20 seconds. And not every place is going to have that family home childcare. It might actually work to have the families hand sanitize, their hands and the child's hands before the child came into the house, so that way the parents didn't have to come in. It will just reduce the risk of the exposure inside of your home and in the classrooms. So it's going to look different depending on what space that you have. And then the most important thing that we should be reiterating, and again, this comes with the communication piece and the honesty, is that people that are self-quarantining should not do drop-off or pickup, especially if the CDC says you are to self-quarantine, then they definitely should not be going to drop off or pick up their child. And I do believe that most of the time CDC does recommend that the child actually is staying home also, but that would be something to double check with the CDC specifically about your case. So health policies. So this is going to look very different, I think, with a lot of how the different practices run. Mostly it's about communication. You want to make sure that you know exactly what you're going to say. So for the example, the question about the runny noses, if you always say, that they have to have no runny noses except for allergies, then that should be really clearly communicated. It should not be a question for the parents that day, like, my child has a runny nose, but it could be teething or it could be allergies, can they stay? They should have a clear communication with the center, with the home child care provider. There should be very clear communication about that. So the health screening that they're having done in the when they first come in, there are a series of questions, which is it can be found on healthvermont.gov. But basically, you're doing your daily health check like we're supposed to. I mean, a lot of the stuff is things that we know we do very well. So it isn't really changing what we're doing. We're just adding a little bit more into this. So we need to ask them, and your staff, don't forget your staff as well, but that they're to ask if they've been in close contact with a person who has COVID-19. remembering that close contact means less than 6 feet apart without a mask, and not just in passing, but like standing there for a substantial amount of time. And then also asking them if they felt unwell with respiratory systems in the last few days. For example, cough, high temperature, shortness of breath, or difficulty breathing. Then we don't just rely on the parents or even our staff, but we also look and listen to them, listening for the breath, making sure that they're breathing comfortably. And then you want to make sure that you take the temperature. So there's a lot of questions about how to take a temperature, or even like what thermometer is the best one to use. Honestly, one that works and one that you know how to use is the best thermometer. But honestly, there really at this time is finding whatever you can. There's been a lot of shortages, and everyone's looking for the no contact thermometers, which are amazing because there's a lot less contact, which means you don't have to switch your gloves out. You don't have to sanitize it as thoroughly. You're not touching them. So that means ideally, if you can find a no contact one, then that's amazing. But whatever you can find, and just making sure that you wash your hands, you wear your gloves. If you've touched the child, then you want to take off your gloves, dispose of them properly, wash your hands again before putting on another pair of gloves for the next person. And then, of course, sanitizing your thermometer. The new fever policy is 100.4. They have to stay home, and then also they have to stay home for 72 hours without medication. And that's really important. They're like, oh, the last dosage was 8 hours ago, so it's definitely worn off. They're gonna come back tomorrow. Then it's 72 hours after no medication. So after that medicine's worn off and no fever. So you definitely want to make sure that that is very clear. And again, this might look different than your normal health practices, where you know your children, you know your families, you know that this child always spikes a little fever, 100.5, every time they are teething. And it's really hard to tell parents that they can't come, especially if you know that they need to work or they have a very important job or their boss isn't as understanding. But we're all in this together, and it's just a really important, understand. And I hate having to tell you this, but it's really important to me that we don't take any precautions, and everybody is being told the same thing. So I can't let it go, and just really holding firm to that, and no matter how hard it might be. So then another health policy is no outside visitors or volunteers. Again, this goes back to with the same person dropping off and picking up. You don't want grandma coming to visit and the neighbor just stopping by, or somebody walking down the road and just wants to wave to the children, or other families that aren't part of it. This is the time to just really kind of stay in our own bubble. The CDD also mentioned nap time spacing. Their preference is 6 feet apart. Now, that's not really doable in a lot of places to really be 6 feet apart. We joked around with the family childcare homes that would basically take up the whole space if we had 6 feet apart, like someone sleeping like in one bedroom then the other. But really, it's just using your common sense about like how to space them in appropriate ways so that they're not breathing on each other, trying to put them toe to head, so that way they're just getting as much space as possible. The next thing, going back to the limiting the contact, you want to try to, of course, you want to make sure that you're sending home information about their child's day, good communication about that, but trying to limit the face-to-face. So over the phone, notes going home instead, using maybe if you have a different program that you use, sending information. For example, I use SmartCare, so that gives me the opportunity to send messages throughout the day or at the end. And then just making sure, that the communication is going, but just limiting that direct contact. And then again, this is something we're really good at, healthy hand hygiene and cleaning and disinfecting. I mean, we're used to washing our hands a ridiculous amount of times during the day, and we're used to cleaning and disinfecting things, and it's not really changing too much. It's just changing the frequency, like really paying attention to who just sneezed on their hands, might need a quick wash, or, you know, what toy did they just sneeze on, or maybe we should wipe down the table a little bit. You know, really just watching the toys and the children and how they're interacting, and trying to provide as much protection and washing their hands and cleaning, disinfecting as much as you can. One of the other things that the health policy is, you know, the CDC really says, and the CDD, for a good reason, they said no soft toys, dress up, stuffies, and stuffies or puppets. So those are all things that cannot be sanitized really easily. I mean, if a child is hugging them, and then, you know, immediately they would have to be taken away. So it doesn't always make sense to have those out. I mean, of course, like if you do decide to have a stuffy, especially if it's a child snuggly, it's really looking into what way can you really minimize the amount of germs and like how it's being spread. I did read on the CDC that they do not say you have to take out books. They said that books are actually not seen, or envelopes are not seen as carriers of COVID-19. So that would include artwork. I saw someone just pop up with a question about artwork, but you know, that seems to be pretty safe. So continuing to make as much art as possible and reading those stories to the children. Next slide.
And Amaria, what I hear from you is follow the guidance, do what we've always done, do it more, and use a lot of common sense. To me, you know, so much of what you're saying, yes, 6 feet apart at nap time is optimum, and in my house that would not work, but head to toe does work, and spreading them as far apart as you can. So to me, that's what I hear so strongly from you, is this, again, this common sense and positive approach to doing this.
Yeah, I mean, really, like this is a lot of, this is a lot of things that we're pretty used to doing, you know, and I think that was the best thing for me to realize. Like when I was really looking at all the things that they were wanting me to wash down, and, you know, at first I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to bleach absolutely everything. And then I'm looking at it and I'm like, I already do all of that. Like, it's not really like too much, you know, it might be just doing it a couple times more during the day, or, you know, after the parents come, you know, giving the doorknobs a quick wipe down, but really it's not as overwhelming as it might feel at first. So the supplies, this is a pretty big list, but it's pretty, I mean, it's pretty common, I would say. I would say nothing in here besides the facial coverings. It might, the facial coverings might feel a little bit overwhelming at first. And I did see a few people asking about child facial coverings. And Lori, you made a comment, I think we had talked before about your program having offered, they're there to be offered, but they're not required to use. I think that's how you handled yours.
Yeah, so we did, any child over 2 who wanted to wear one and could do so safely without taking it on and off was able to do that. Some days they might want to do that. Some days they might want to do that. I did hear on Friday, I did hear Brina Holmes saying, of course, she's giving a webinar at 3:30. So a lot of the questions that I'm seeing pop up really are probably more directed for her, but I did hear her say that it's great if we can move towards having our children over 5, if you're serving school agers, to begin to wear child masks. Like that's like the best, the ideal, right? But we're not living in ideal times, can't always do the ideal, but we did have them available, and we do have them available to offer children. I know people are concerned about, oh, well, then they're going to touch them, or they're going to, right? Well, that's where the proper hand washing comes in. Like I heard a lot of feedback at the very beginning about, well, young children might touch my mask. Well, that's okay. If you're practicing proper hand washing in your closed group, in your classroom, and they touch your mask, their hands are clean. If they're not, right, then you can after they touch your mask, you'd wash their hands. And we also have you want to have extra facial coverings available, because you will need to change them out. We don't come in the morning and just wear the same one all day long. Anytime we take it off, like for a meal, like if I'm gonna have my lunch, my mask comes off, goes in the laundry, I eat my lunch, a clean mask goes on. So we have some pretty specific guidelines and procedures for staff around the mask wearing. We have a training that our on-site educators have done and our remote educators are doing so that they can make sure they're doing it properly. And children will need that same thing. If they are gonna wear a mask, you certainly wanna make sure they know that how to do that, how to take it on and off safely and washing their hands. But for sure, like every program is going to be different. Every child's going to be different, but certainly if they are open to it, it's a great practice, especially for, you know, your children over 3. And we've had families, that's one of the questions that came up from our families when we did the small group meetings was, well, I want my child to wear a mask, so can you make sure my child is wearing his or her mask? And I said, no, not really, right? I mean, I can encourage your child. We can, you know, be there. We can, you know, send in a couple of masks. But if the child is taking the mask off or does not want to have the mask on, no, we do not have a policy that forces children to wear masks. I don't think that would probably work too well in this time period.
And experts have been very clear that very young children who are not able to put them on and take them off themselves correctly should not wear them. So infants, toddlers should not even have access to them. So when we're talking about wearing them or the choice of wearing them, we're talking about older preschoolers and school-age children. And Lori, I just have wondered, is the training that your staff do and that you're offering to children, is that something you've developed yourself, I'm assuming? Or
yeah, in the collective experience here, a member of our leadership team who's an early educator who's not needed in the classroom at the moment, she has developed a lot of these resources. And I was thinking, people are asking for resources, that maybe we could send you all our resources to share with other people. I don't know, like we have a resource list at the end, but it's a little bit different resource list. If people are looking for tangible things, I'm also happy that people reach out to me individually. I'm happy to share whatever we have. We're all in this together.
Well, and something like this, I could see us having a link on the Shared Services website under the Vermont COVID-19 resources. So you and I can follow up with that too.
Sounds good.
So going back, facial coverings, I've just a plenty of them. I would think. I use a facial covering myself. I probably go through 3, maybe 4 in a day, depending. It's not too crazy. Of course, like with more staff, and that's the point that Lori said. Is taking it off and knowing what to do with it. You know, you don't want to take it off. I've heard people be like, oh, I just drape it across one ear, or I like just push it down on my neck. Well, then you think about like where all those germs go, and it's really not the best practice. So you want to make sure that if you're going to take it off, then it's off. And you know, I do have 2 staff that come in, and I have them wear a mask, and I told them, if you need a break from your mask, let me know, because you know, we're not in danger for ratios. They just kind of give me a break so I can do some more directory type stuff. But then take it off, go take a break outside or whatever, and then get a new mask. This is where you dispose of it. And you know, just really making sure that they have as many as possible. If they are frequent water drinkers, you know, you don't want them pulling other masks, taking a drink, putting it back up. That's just not going to help. That's going to defeat the purpose. And yes, that goes back to with the children also. If the children are playing with it and putting it on and off, then yes, it defeats the purpose of that. So just really making sure that you have plenty of different things that you need, you know, thermometers, gloves, bleach, laundry access. Lori and Nicole both mentioned that, or, you know, just having availability to wash the things that are going, toilet paper, eyewear. I haven't seen too much recommendations for eyewear. I know some places try to have eyewear and have suggested to their staff wearing eyewear. It wasn't as successful because the glasses kept getting fogged up, and it was actually kind of defeated the purpose. You know, just felt like it was too much. So I don't have much information about that, but I'm sure the CDC or CDD would have more information about what would be recommended. Then of course your paper towels, hand soap, hand sanitizer, and then large button-up shirts. Just so staff can put on a different shirt on over, or encouraging your staff to bring multiple shirts to wear and to be able to change out, you know, if a child is drooling a lot on them, you know, especially the people that are caring for infants and young toddlers, their teeth coming in, they're drooling all over the place. You know, you want to try to minimize how many different kids are touching the drool and everything else like that. So you would want to be able to change your shirt. So they suggested a large button-up shirt for you to be able to take off and put on as needed. I am working from home, so if I need to, I can just run upstairs and grab extra shirts, of course. But my staff do pack like at least 6 different shirts there. Like I basically live in my car right now because just in case. But and then really the biggest questions. So here's the list of supplies, and then I know for me, I was like, where in the world am I going to find these things? Like hand sanitizer and, you know, hand soap was weird for a while, and toilet paper. I have no idea why not. I mean, these are all things that were like, we just need them. I don't like just to function. These are the things that I need just to function anyways, besides the facial coverings, I guess. But, you know, really the things that I have found to be supportive is Let's Grow Kids has been really great about trying to support our community, our child care program, finding the things, you know, they're just, or sending out information to do self connections with distributors. I just got in touch with a distributor that was really excited to be working with child care programs. Connecting with your network, maybe somebody has a friend that has access to different things and can hook you up with different materials. You know, you have your, and not just your network of like your friends, but like your childcare networks. I'm part of ours. I'm co-leading our early childhood co-op, which is what we call our starting points. But, you know, we connect together. What do you need to open up? What are you looking for? And then I'm taking emails and being like, all right, this is what you're looking for. Let me see what I can find, and getting into contact with Let's Grow Kids, the reading, like, where did you find this stuff? Who tapped with? And then again, using the shared services website, they are doing a great job in making sure that they're also connecting different childcare programs together. And sometimes it feels a little unnerving as a homes provider because I don't need as much bleach, you know, as a big center would, you know, that has like 4 or 5 classrooms. You know, I only have like basically 1 little classroom. So my needs for bleach can feel very different. And like, I don't need a huge supply right now, but, you know, it just really, I would really encourage the home providers to connect with other home providers, but then also with the centers, and just trying to figure out like, can I connect with your order and just get 1 bottle of bleach and I'll pay for you for that? You know, just really kind of connecting. Again, like what Lori and Nicole said, we're in this together. We all want this to be successful. We want everyone to be safe. We want childcare to come back. We want to support our families. And that's the only way that we can do that is by staying together. You know, I tell people we're a different sort of community because we're not as competing as you would think. we're very supportive of each other and want to share resources with each other. So I just think that's really great, and I just want everyone to be encouraged to use that.
I think it's also really important to feel that we can connect with our parents as well. You'd be really, really surprised what our parents are willing to donate or help or have access to. So if you're having a hard time getting something and you're not able to, you reach out to all of your resources and you can't get them at the moment, reach out to your parents, because I think you'd be pleasantly surprised what they're willing. And most of them honestly just donate it. Even though that's not what we're asking, that's what they'll do.
Yeah, I actually, I just renovated my garage right before COVID-19 kind of hit our area, and I was looking to get more hand sanitizer for there and some bleach just to have out in that room, toilet paper. And then COVID-19 came and like everything was out, and I was like, oh my goodness, I need it just to have. And like now I'm not gonna have it. And so I ended up asking parents like, can you be on the lookout for hand sanitizer? Can you look out for bleach? And one of the families was like, I have this extra bottle of hand sanitizer. I probably won't use all of it. So here you go. You can just have it. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I just want to cry. just felt
Yeah.
like such a lifesaver.
Well, and it's another way that parents and providers work as partners, and it's a great approach. The other thing I just wanted to mention in terms of, I love your idea of programs joining together to do an order, because sometimes what we found is some of the suppliers, the vendors, only want to, they're only having these supplies for a certain amount of time, and they want to do bulk orders. They don't necessarily want to do little tiny orders. And so if an early childhood network, formerly Starting Points Network, or a group of centers, or a center and some homes can do one larger order, often that's a better chance to get access to the supplies. I do want to just say that Let's Grow Kids, other advocates, I think the Child Development Division are all thinking about ways that we can continue to focus our efforts on getting some of these supplies, especially the thermometer piece, resolved. So again, no promises, no answers, but people are aware that to open these things are needed, and so folks have not given up on still looking to find ways to access these things.
Yes, thank you. And next slide. So these are some things specific to family home child care programs. When we were given the decision to either stay open or close, a lot of my areas, family home child care, we started emailing each other and then actually private messaging. We're friends on Facebook, that sort of thing. And just asking each other, what are you doing? What are you feeling? Are you taking in kids? This is really scary because, this is not just your place of work, but this is also your place, your safety place. We're very much used to families coming in and seeing our home. They become just a larger sense of family, really. And so we had to talk a lot about what are we doing to make changes. So these are some just ideas. And again, this isn't going to work for everybody. It really depends on your space, but restricting access into the home. So it might look like popping open the door and for the parents, and either they come in and they stand on the doormat while you do the health check, or just not. Maybe it's standing on the porch while you do the health check. You might be, and then bringing the children inside the house and walking them in to wash their hands instead of the parents walking in and washing their hands. I know one family home child care provider actually allows the parents to come in, but she screens them at the door also. She screens the parents and takes their temperature and everything else, because she said, if you have a fever, you're not coming into my home either. So, it kind of, for her, it made her feel like the best of both worlds, that she could have the parents feel like welcome to come in, but then also keeping her house safe. Having specific places for childcare versus family. If you have your own children that are around, depending on what your program might look like, now maybe the childcare, children can't go into your children's bedroom. So that just reducing the amount of touching and exposure and just that cross-contamination, keeping objects in one specific location. So knowing where all the childcare things are, having, the appropriate containers for everything. Lori talked about, setting it up so that all of a child's objects are in a place that is not touching another child's objects. And that can be very challenging for family home childcare providers because we don't necessarily have the access for cubby space, so we're used to just piling all the coats together. So now it's really looking to what are we going to do? What do I need? And so it might just be getting some of those boxes just to stack them all in. One family childcare provider said that she had a way to just keep their stuff outside. So having coat hooks outside that, right outside her door, it's protected from the weather, but just keeping it outside of her house. You just want to make sure that you try to look at your space. And I think that, honestly, family home childcare providers are really good at kind of looking at the space and figuring out what can I do with the space to make it work for my family and be safe and everything else. They're just using that common sense and figuring out what can I do, and just to minimize everything. It's not going to be perfect, and we as a panel have talked a lot about our best practice. We're always looking to do best practice no matter what. And our pre-COVID-19 best practice might and probably will look very different from our post-COVID-19. This is not the same thing. I had reservations about taking away the infant soft toys. It didn't feel right. But then, really when I thought about it, like, how many times has a child like tried to pick it up to give to the baby? And then, is that safe for the baby? And then can I sanitize it really well? And is the water hot enough or not? And yes, definitely, if you had one teacher sitting there and passing the toy to a child and then immediately taking it away and then putting it away to be disinfected, then like that's just using common sense and figuring out what can work best for your practice. For me, being so much by myself, it was really hard. It's hard for me to imagine not allowing another child to touch something like a soft toy and the baby maybe getting it and like putting it in their mouth. So for me, that was like nope, we're just going to figure out something else. And really, like, the baby hasn't really mattered too much. She found some other chewy toys that she prefers, actually, and she's been having a blast, just having different toys than I even thought. So really, it's it might look very different. It might feel like you're doing everything wrong, but really, Lori, Nicole, and I, like, just, it's going to look different, but just really being mindful, I think, and just that clear communication that we can have.
I think that's a really good point. And the other thing we talked about that I know some of you probably are already doing or do anyway, but it seems like, first of all, I've never been a home family childcare provider. So, but I have immense respect for those who do, because you work with so many different ages. And I know it's probably a lot more to manage than in an individual specific age classroom. But if you can rotate out toys and so you might not have as many options, but you also don't have as much to clean all at the same time either, right? And so, like, there's that as well. Like, less could be more in this time period. And also, one of the things that we touched upon yesterday, maybe not in this exact way, but remember, it really is about, the child caregiver interactions. Like, that's really important. Not that they don't need toys and sensory centers and books and all those things, but remember, one of your greatest, gifts that you can offer to children is your presence, your interactions, the way in which you're guiding them in learning. And really, you can learn from anything. So choose the things that just make sense for your program and what you feel like you can handle in this time period, and that's okay.
Yes, exactly. So we put together a list of resources and platforms that we find very helpful. So just to go over them really quickly, the platforms for communication. There's email, of course, phone calls, Facebook. Little Green Light is another program. Zoom. Constant Contact is another program that we use, and SmartCare. And really just finding something that you're really comfortable and that the families are comfortable and just using them, put them to use. Resources to guide communication. There's Let's Grow Kids, of course, and Vermont Department of Health, Vermont Department of Labor, Child Development Division, the SBA, CPA, your payroll company might have some good resources, your local bank, professional development sites. They've been doing a really good job of putting out a variety of different things in there. Going onto shared surfaces and taking a look at that, using your other local childcare programs or your network groups and really bonding together. And of course, if you have a lawyer and need some specific guidelines, then definitely putting them to use. And then we also put down some links that you can just click on after it goes live. So then you can, or not live, but after it gets posted, and then you can kind of go on from there. So you don't even have to do some of the research on your own to find the websites. But, and then of course, like on our next slide, definitely has, it has our contact information on there also. And, the three of us really want to make sure that anything that we didn't answer, but people want to ask, then we can definitely do that. If somebody brought up something specific and want to ask if they can get emailed over to be used, then definitely all three of us want to support everybody else that is opening up, reopening, nervous, all of those big feelings, want some support, just want someone to listen to, you know, definitely if you're a family home child care provider and you would like to talk to me about more about that and what I see, then definitely contact me. I'm more than happy to help.
You women are amazing. And I just want to acknowledge a couple themes that came through all three of the presentations that you did. A whole theme around positivity and honesty and not trying to do it all, but sharing, not only sharing the load of the task, but sharing the responsibility, and then the gift of feeling accomplished and connected. So sharing the work. And then what's so striking to me is the peer leadership that you women are offering around setting a tone, being responsive to families, children, and staff, and then also very forward thinking about our goal, which is to make sure there is childcare so that folks, so that our, you know, our community can reopen and folks can get what they need through their childcare system. So we are running to the end, but I wanted to turn to Lorraine for a minute. Is there anything that we haven't addressed that really is within the realm of these women who certainly are not experts in the way of, you know, health and legal and regulatory compliance, but really are experienced and have shared, you know, have so much to share with us? Is there anything that jumps out, Lorraine, that we want to touch on?
I just want to make sure people know that Maria shared the social story. Well, Maria shared Amaria's social stories link in the chat box. If you missed that, that was one thing. And that I think there was a lot of great information shared, and the things that couldn't be addressed, again, for the health department or for CBD, pretty much for people to go there to seek advice from.
And we can't urge you enough to go. If we know that people wanted to get on this webinar and we're not able to, but also Brina Holmes' webinar following at 3:30, but they are recorded and they're worth listening to, and you know, you can do it late at night or early in the morning or while you're out jogging before the children arrive at your house. So that's what Lorraine does it early in the morning. So thank you all. We appreciate Lori, Nicole, Amaria, your time, your expertise, and we appreciate all the folks who participated today. Contact us if you want more information, and we hope you have a nice day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.